Hello, I'm Peter. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. Have you ever, in the midst of modern life's relentless churn, felt a strange pull backward? Not toward a specific memory, but toward something older, a rhythm your body seems to remember, even though your mind never lived it. The weight of bread made by hand. The particular cold that settles into bone when there's no central heating to chase it away. The kind of tired that sleep can't quite fix because it lives deeper than muscle. Tonight, we're not going to talk about knights in shining armor or ladies in silk gowns gazing from castle towers. Those images belong to storybooks and films that need drama. What I want to share with you is something different, something quieter, something honest. I want you to imagine living just one full turn of the sun in the 14th century, not as nobility, not as clergy, but as one of the vast, uncounted souls who made up 9/10 of the population. The ones whose names were never written down, whose faces were never painted, whose voices echo now only in the furrows they left in fields and the worn stones of cathedral steps they climbed on feast days. Let me be clear with you from the start. This won't be comfortable. Medieval life wasn't the romantic past we sometimes imagine. There was cold that ached in your bones, hunger that never quite left, work that wore bodies down decades before their time. But there was also something else, something we've almost lost, a clarity, a directness, a world where what you needed to survive was straightforward, even if getting it was hard. The great plagues and wars, the kings and battles we read about, they're the dramatic punctuation marks in a very long, quiet sentence. Most of life happened in between. In the space between the dots, there were millions of ordinary mornings when someone woke before dawn, feet touching cold floor body, aching from yesterday's labor, and thought only of getting through to nightfall with enough bread and enough warmth. That's what we're after tonight. Not the exceptional, the ordinary. The weight of one day carried from bell to bell, from sunrise to sunset, and back into darkness again. Here's what I've come to understand after years of studying these centuries. Medieval people weren't superhuman. They weren't made of different material than we are. They felt cold the same way. Hunger hurt them the same way. They wanted safety and comfort and full bellies just like we do. What they didn't have was any choice in the matter. The work waited whether they felt ready or not. The field needed tending. The animals needed feeding. Survival demanded everything, every single day. And somehow they managed it. Not because they were tougher, though their bodies were certainly harder than ours, but because humans adapt. We find ways to endure. We discover small mercies in brutal circumstances. A warm fire after cold work, a child's laugh, the satisfaction of a task completed. They built lives in conditions that would break most of us, and they did it without complaint because complaining changed nothing. So settle in. Let the tension drain from your shoulders. We're going to walk through a day together, you and I. I'll be here the whole time, your companion through these hours that no longer exist except in memory and imagination. I'm not going to lie to you about how hard it was, but I'm also not going to turn it into nightmare fuel. This is just life, human life, the kind that billions of people lived for thousands of years before someone invented antibiotics and central heating and the weekend. When we're done, when we've lived these 24 hours that span 700 years, I think you'll find something unexpected. Not just gratitude for modern comfort, though that might come. Not superiority, because that would miss the point entirely. But perhaps a deeper recognition that every moment of ease we experience now was paid for by generations of people who endured without those things, who kept going because stopping wasn't an option, who found meaning in simple survival because survival was meaningful. They weren't suffering nobly. They were just living, getting through another day, doing what needed doing. And somehow, in that living, in that stubborn persistence, they created the future that became our present. Every small improvement built on the last. Every generation making things slightly less brutal for the next. Until eventually, impossibly, we arrived here. Where water comes from, taps, and food stays fresh, and a cut on your hand doesn't risk your life. Tonight, I'm going to show you where we came from, the reality behind the romance, the actual texture of medieval life, the smell of it, the taste, the ache in muscles, and the constant calculation of whether you'd have enough to make it through winter. But I'll also show you the humanity, because that never changes. The love between parent and child, the satisfaction of work done, the companionship of shared hardship, the simple fact that humans keep going, keep trying, keep hoping, even when the odds seem impossible. So let's begin where every medieval day began. In darkness, in cold, in the space between sleep and waking, where the body knows even before the mind catches up that rest is over and the wheel must turn again. The bells are about to ring, and I'll be right here with you every step of the way as we walk through one ordinary, extraordinary day in a world that no longer exists, except in the stories we tell about it. Let's step back 700 years together. The bell hits you like a punch. You're not ready. You're never ready. Your body got maybe 5 hours of broken sleep on what amounts to a sack of rotting straw, and now some distant church tower is demanding you wake up and work. Again. Like yesterday, like every day of your life, you open your eyes to complete darkness. No night light, no phone screen, nothing. The fire died hours ago because nobody's feeding it overnight that costs wood you don't have. So you lie there in the black, feeling every place your body decided to hurt during the night. Your back, your knees, that shoulder that hasn't worked right since you fell 2 years ago, and there was no doctor to see because doctors are for rich people. The room smells like people, specifically like people who haven't bathed in weeks, living with animals in a space the size of a modern bathroom. There's you, your wife next to you. Her body heat the only thing keeping you from shivering. The kids piled together in the corner, and over there by the wall behind a rough wooden partition, a cow and a pig. The animals provide warmth. They also provide constant animal smells. Manure, wet fur, the thick musk of creatures that live indoors. You're wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Medieval people don't have pajamas. They don't have changes of clothes. You own maybe 2 outfits total. One for work, which is also for sleeping, and one for Sunday Mass that's slightly less filthy. The wool tunic you're lying in is stiff with dried sweat and dirt. It scratches. It's always scratched. Your skin probably has a rash somewhere from the constant friction of unwashed fabric. But here's the thing that really gets you. You can't just lie there and think about how much this sucks. Because the bell rang, and when the bell rings, you move. The Lord's land needs working. Your own strip of field needs tending. The animals need feeding. The work doesn't pause because you're tired. It never pauses. You force yourself up. The movement sends a shock of cold through your body. The temperature inside is maybe 5 degrees warmer than outside, which in late autumn means it's maybe 35-40 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see your breath. Your joints crack loud enough to wake the cow which snorts and shifts. Nobody else moves yet. You're the father. You go first. That's how it works. Your feet hit the dirt floor. Literally dirt. Packed earth with some rushes scattered over it to absorb, well, everything. Spilled food. Tracked in mud. Other things we won't detail. The rushes get changed when they start to rot, which isn't often enough. So walking barefoot means stepping on God knows what. You find your wooden shoes in the dark by memory. They're not comfortable. They're hunks of carved wood that keep your feet elevated above the worst of the mud and filth outside. But they rub, always rubbing. Blisters are just part of having feet. Now you need to deal with overnight needs. You fumbled in the dark for the chamber pot. It's under the bed shared by everyone in the family. It's made of clay cracked in 2 places and currently full of everyone's nighttime urination. The smell is sharp, ammoniac. You add to it because what choice do you have? Then you set it aside to deal with later, probably by dumping it in the street or into the communal cesspit, which is really just a hole in the ground that fills until someone has to dig a new one. Let me tell you what 16 hours of farm labor actually means, not in abstract terms, in physical reality. You're going to burn somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 calories today. That's nearly double what a sedentary modern person eats. But those calories have to come from somewhere, and what you have is bread. Bread and thin soup and ale. That's it. That's the fuel for all-day labor that would make a modern construction worker quit by lunch. You stumble outside. The village is a collection of maybe 20 similar hovels scattered around a common green. Smoke rises from a few doorways. Others are emerging shadowy figures in pre-dawn grey. Nobody speaks. What is there to say? Morning is just the beginning of the same day, repeated endlessly. The field is waiting, always waiting. It stretches out in long strips, yours mixed with your neighbours. In a pattern established so long ago, nobody remembers why. You're farming in the same way your great-great-grandfather farmed. Same tools, same techniques, same grinding repetition. Your plough is wood and iron. The iron blade is precious. It's been sharpened so many times there's not much left. When it finally breaks, replacing it might cost more than you earn in months. So, you're careful. You check it every morning. Oil it with animal fat. Pray it lasts another season. The ox you're borrowing. You can't afford your own needs to be hitched. It's not your ox. It belongs to the Lord. So you're also responsible for its welfare. If something happens to it on your watch, you're in debt for life. Literally. Peasant debt is generational. Your grandchildren would still be paying it off. And then you work. The motion is simple. Guide the plow. Keep the furrow straight. Turn at the end. Do it again. And again. And again. For hours. Your hands grip the wooden handles so hard they cramp. The ox moves at its own pace, which is slow so you can't rush even if you wanted to. This is your life measured in furrows. Accomplishment measured in rows of turned earth. By the time the sun actually rises, you've been working for over an hour. Your body is awake now in the worst way. Every muscle protesting. Your back especially. Bent over the plow, absorbing every bump and rut. Your spine is taking damage that will compound over decades. By 40, if you live that long, you'll be permanently stooped, unable to straighten fully. That's just what backs do when you work them this hard with no rest. Around you, the village is in full operation. Everyone working. Old men who can barely walk, still doing what they can. Women carrying water, making cheese, spinning wool, managing households, while also working the fields. Children, some as young as 5 or 6, doing age-appropriate tasks. Watching geese so they don't wander. Gathering sticks for kindling. Learning through observation that this is life. This is all there is. The sun climbs. Morning becomes late morning. Your stomach starts complaining around hour 3 of work. The handful of cold pottage you choked down at dawn is long gone. But there's no break until the church bell rings. Sext. Noon. That's still hours away. So you work through the hunger. Train yourself to ignore it, just like you ignore the cold, the fatigue, the pain in your lower back that's getting sharper. This is the reality nobody tells you about medieval life. It's not noble. It's not character building. It's just exhausting. Day after day of pushing your body past what it wants to do, knowing tomorrow will be exactly the same. The only variety is seasonal. Spring planting, summer growing, fall harvest, winter surviving, then spring again, until you die. That's the schedule. That's all of it. By the time noon finally comes, you've turned maybe 30 rows. Your hands have blisters on top of yesterday's blisters. Your clothes are soaked with sweat despite the cold. And you're ready for food. Real food. Or at least what passes for it. The noon bell is the sweetest sound you'll hear all day. You unhitch the ox, lead it to water, then collapse at the field's edge where you left a bundle this morning. Your wife packed it, wrapped in a rag that used to be part of someone's shirt before it deteriorated beyond wearing. Inside is lunch, and oh boy. Let me tell you about medieval food, because this is where things get properly disgusting. The bread comes out first. It's about the size and weight of a brick, dark brown, almost black in places, made from a mixture of rye and barley ground on millstones that leave grit in every bite. You can feel that grit between your teeth immediately. It's not flour in the modern sense. It's grain crushed with liberal amounts of stone dust mixed in. This is why medieval skulls found by archaeologists have teeth worn down to nubs. You're literally grinding away your teeth with every meal. The bread is days old, maybe a week. You only bake when the communal oven is available, which isn't often. So bread gets made in batches and eaten until it's gone. By day 5, it's hard enough to use as a weapon. You gnaw at it like a dog with a bone. Eventually, spit and determination soften it enough to chew. The taste is sour, slightly moldy. There might be ergot in there, a fungus that grows on rye and causes hallucinations, convulsions, and sometimes gangrene. But you can't see it mixed into the dark flour, so you just eat and hope. Let me put this in perspective. That ergot, it's basically natural LSD. Bad batches of grain could make entire villages start tripping simultaneously. People seeing demons, feeling like their skin is on fire. In some cases, blood flow to extremities would get cut off, and fingers or toes would literally turn black and fall off. They called it St. Anthony's Fire. Whole communities going insane together because their bread was poisoned and nobody knew why. You're probably eating a little ergot right now. Not enough to kill you, just enough to maybe feel slightly off, a little dizzy, colors slightly too bright. But that's normal. That's just how you feel most of the time. Perpetually low-level sick from contaminated food. With the bread, you have ale. You pull out a leather flask and drink deep. The ale is thick, cloudy, full of sediment that you've learned to let settle before drinking. It tastes sour and yeasty and nothing like modern beer. The alcohol content is low, maybe 2 to 3%. You'd need to drink gallons to get drunk. But here's the thing. You basically do drink gallons. Because water will kill you faster than work will. Every stream, every well, every water source is contaminated with human waste. People are dumping chamber pots into rivers. Animals are dying upstream. There's no water treatment, no filtration. Just raw sewage mixing with drinking water. So you drink ale, morning, noon, and night. Everyone does, including children. Kids as young as 5 are drinking ale with every meal, not as punishment, not as a treat, as survival. The brewing process kills the bacteria that make water deadly. Nobody understands the science, but they know empirically that ale drinkers stay healthier than water drinkers. So 5-year-olds are walking around with a low-level buzz all day, every day. Medieval childhood is literally growing up drunk. You wash down the terrible bread with terrible ale. And think about what else is in your lunch bundle. There might be cheese. Hard cheese aged until it's more salt than dairy. It'll keep without refrigeration, which is why it exists. You gnaw at it. The taste is aggressive, sharp enough to make your eyes water. If you're lucky, there's a piece of salted pork, not fresh. Fresh meat is for special occasions or for the Lord's table. This is from the pig you slaughtered 6 months ago, preserved in so much salt that you need to soak it before cooking, or it's inedible. But you're eating it cold right now, so it's basically a salt lick shaped like meat. Your blood pressure is spiking. Your tongue is shriveling. but it's protein. Precious protein. Maybe there's an onion, raw. You bite into it like an apple. The burn of raw onion is familiar. You've been eating them your whole life. They grow easy and keep through winter. Between the salt meat and the raw onion, your breath could peel paint. Not that anyone cares. Everyone's breath is terrible. Oral hygiene isn't really a thing yet. Now let's talk about the food you're not eating. Fresh fruit, only in season, which is a narrow window. And if fruit appears, you're probably selling it for money rather than eating it yourself. Fresh vegetables, same thing. What grows in your small garden plot either gets preserved for winter or sold. Fresh meat, maybe once a year when you slaughter your pig. Fresh fish, only if you live near the coast. For everyone else, fish arrives preserved. Dried fish hard as leather. Salted fish so intense, it's basically inedible. You soak it for days just to make it chewable. The concept of balanced nutrition doesn't exist. You eat what's available, which means your diet is roughly 80% grain. Bread, pottage, ale made from grain. That's your caloric base. The other 20% is whatever else you can scrounge. This is why scurvy is common, why rickets is common, why everyone is slightly malnourished all the time. Let me describe pottage, because you're going to eat it for dinner, and it's worth understanding what we're dealing with. Imagine a cauldron hanging over the fire. It's been there for days. Every day you add something. Turnips, cabbage, onions, maybe some old bread to thicken it. If you're fortunate, a bone with scraps of meat clinging to it. This all boils together into a thick soup that tastes like nothing and everything, and mostly just bland. You season it with whatever herbs grow wild. Parsley, sage, salt if you can afford it. But mostly, it's just boiled vegetables turned to mush. You eat the same pottage for days until it's gone. Then you make more. Same recipe, same taste. Month after month, year after year. The monotony of the diet is mind-numbing. You don't remember the last time you tasted something genuinely new. Food is fuel. That's all. You shovel it in to keep working. Any pleasure is incidental. And here's the kicker. This is a decent meal by medieval standards. You have bread, you have ale, you have some cheese and meat. You're doing okay. Other people have less, much less. In bad years, people eat bark, acorns, things we'd consider animal feed. Hunger is always there, lurking at the edges. One bad harvest away from starvation. You finish eating, the food sits heavy in your stomach. Not satisfied, never satisfied. Just full enough to keep going. Around you, others are also finishing their meals. There's not much conversation. Everyone's too focused on eating and too tired to chat. Someone coughs. A wet, rattling cough that suggests something's wrong in their lungs. Nobody comments. Illness is common. Death is common. You just hope it's not contagious. The bell will ring soon. None. The 9th hour. Back to work. You have maybe 5 minutes. You use them to lie back. Close your eyes, feel the sun on your face, if there is sun. These brief moments of rest are all that keep you sane. just sitting still, not thinking, not working, just being. Then the bell rings. Your body protests. Every joint says no. But you stand anyway. The ox needs rehitching. The field needs finishing. And tonight you'll eat more of the same food, and tomorrow you'll do this all again. That's medieval dining. Now let's talk about where all that food ends up. Because what goes in must come out. And where it comes out is somehow worse than what went in. Let me tell you about medieval sanitation, or rather, the complete lack of it. Because this is where things get truly disgusting. You thought the food was bad. Wait until you hear about the toilets, or what passed for toilets, which is mostly just holes and buckets and the fervent hope that what you're about to do doesn't end up on you. First, let's establish the baseline reality. There's no plumbing, none. No pipes, no sewers, no water treatment. The Romans had some of that centuries ago, but that knowledge got lost. So medieval Europe basically reverted to everyone just dealing with their waste however they could, which mostly meant putting it somewhere else and hoping that counted as dealt with. The most common toilet is the chamber pot. It's a clay or wooden bowl that lives under your bed. At night, when nature calls, you don't go outside. Too dark, too dangerous, too cold. You squat over the pot and do your business. The sound wakes everyone in the room because remember, you're all sleeping in one small space. But nobody comments. This is normal. Nighttime urination and defecation are communal family events. Come morning, someone needs to empty the pot. Usually that's a woman's job. Lucky them. They take the vessel full of everyone's overnight contributions and, well, here's where it gets creative. Ideally, there's a cesspit somewhere nearby. It's a hole in the ground lined with stones if you're fancy where waste accumulates. Every few years, someone has to dig it out. This job exists. It's called a gong farmer. They work at night shoveling literal human shit, and they're paid extremely well because nobody else will do it. Even in medieval times, this job was considered so foul that gong farmers were often required to live outside town limits. But cesspit access isn't guaranteed. Maybe yours is full. Maybe it's too far. Maybe you're just tired and don't care, so you do what everyone else does. You open a window and dump the contents into the street below. Maybe you shout a warning first. Gardez-le, supposedly from the French regardez l'eau. Watch out for the water, though what's coming isn't water. It's a day's worth of family waste falling from a second-story window. Medieval streets aren't paved. They're dirt. Or in cities, maybe cobblestones with gaps between. All that human wastelands and just sits there, mixed with animal waste from the horses, pigs, chickens and cows that share the streets, mixed with food scraps and dead animals and whatever else people throw out. In rain, it becomes a flowing river of sewage. In summer, it bakes into a crusty layer that kicks up as dust. Walking through a medieval town means watching where you step constantly. The ground is literally treacherous. One wrong step, and your foot goes into something soft and horrible. This is why people wear pattens, those wooden platforms that strap to your shoes. They keep you elevated an inch or two above the worst of it. Rich people have servants walk ahead of them testing the ground. Poor people just accept that they're going to be ankle-deep in filth most days. The smell is beyond description. Imagine the worst public restroom you've ever encountered. Now remove all ventilation in the smell of rotting food and dead animals, let it bake in summer sun or freeze into icy chunks in winter and multiply by 100. That's a medieval street. You can smell a town from miles away. Travelers use the stench as a navigation tool. When you smell the shit, you know you're getting close to civilization. Cities have it worse, way worse. London in the 1300s has maybe 50,000 people, all of them producing waste. The Thames serves triple duty as water source transportation route and open sewer. Tanneries on the banks dump their chemicals, which include lime and dog feces, used to treat leather straight into the river. The shambles. The butchering district pours animal blood and offal directly into the water. Fish guts, industrial waste, dead animals, human waste from houses lining the banks. It all goes in the Thames. And then people drink from the Thames. Not directly, usually. They're not idiots. But wells near the river get contaminated. Water carries upstream. The whole system is basically a cholera incubator, which is why ale, remember, is safer. The brewing kills the bacteria. Water just delivers the bacteria straight to your intestines. Let's talk about public latrines, because cities have these. And they're marginally better than just throwing waste in the streets. They're usually built over rivers or streams. You sit on a wooden bench with holes cut in it, multiple holes. Because privacy isn't a thing. You're shoulder to shoulder with strangers, all of you defecating into the same flowing water below. The smell in these places is eye-watering. The wood is stained. The floor is slippery with things you don't think about. But it's considered civilized because at least the waste is going somewhere. Castles have garderobes. These are the fancy version. A small room built into the thickness of the wall with a stone or wooden seat. There's a hole in the seat that drops down a shaft built into the wall structure. The shaft exits somewhere far below, ideally into a moat or cesspit. I say ideally because sometimes the shaft just opens onto the outside wall. So waste slides down the exterior of the castle, creating brown streaks and a smell that never goes away. Garderobe comes from the French for wardrobe. You know why they're called that. Because people would hang their clothes near the toilet. The ammonia from urine was thought to kill fleas. So, your clothing storage and your toilet were the same room. The smell infused into the fabric. Medieval nobility walked around smelling like a bathroom, because that's where they kept their clothes. Here's a detail that'll stick with you. Toilet paper doesn't exist. What do you use? Leaves if you're outside. Hay or straw if you have it. Wool scraps. Old rags. Your hand, and then rinse it in a bucket of water everyone shares. Sometimes people used a communal sponge on a stick, which is exactly as horrifying as it sounds. The sponge got rinsed in salt water or vinegar between uses, not cleaned. rinsed. Hygiene is an absent concept. Infections are constant. Hemorrhoids and intestinal worms are universal. The wealthy purge their parasites violently. The poor just endure them, sometimes feeling them move within. Bathing is rare, a luxury in drafty bathhouses, where you stew in the communal filth of strangers. The water turns grey with your own soil, revealing pale, vulnerable skin beneath. But such warmth is fleeting. Most go months without washing, especially in winter, believing water weakens the body. Clothes and hair go unwashed. Lice and endless itching become your normal. You only wash hands and face before meals. A ritual for the rich, a splash from a bucket for the rest. And in time, you stop noticing. The smell, the grime, the low hum of discomfort become your baseline. Clean is not a memory. This is simply how a body feels. Each evening, you empty the chamber pot into the street. The splash in the cesspit, the stench. None of it registers anymore. You rinse it sparingly, for water is precious, and return it beneath the bed. The cycle continues, waste in waste, out no treatment, no escape. You live in collective filth, breathing it, wearing it. This is simply how life smells. And when you get sick, as everyone does, what comes next is worse than the waste itself. You wake up wrong. That's how you know something's happening. Not dramatically wrong. Not pain so sharp it makes you scream. Just wrong. Your throat feels like you swallowed broken pottery. Your head has a dull throb behind your eyes that pulses with your heartbeat. When you swallow, it hurts in a way that suggests something's settling in to stay. You get up anyway. Work doesn't stop for feeling poorly. But by midday, you know you're in trouble. Your body's talking loud now. Fever making your skin hot and your thoughts fuzzy. A cough starting deep in your chest, wet and productive. You're sweating despite the cold. Classic signs of an infection. In modern times, you'd take some antibiotics and be fine in a week. In medieval times, you might die. It's genuinely 50-50. Let me tell you about medieval medicine, because calling it medicine is generous. It's more like organized guessing backed by theories that are completely wrong. But it's all there is, so when you're sick, you take what you can get. First, understand that medical theory is based on the 4 humours: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These 4 fluids control your health. When they're balanced, you're healthy. When they're unbalanced, you're sick. The doctor's job is to restore balance through various methods, all of which are horrible, none of which work. But they're applied with absolute confidence. Your village doesn't have a doctor. Real physicians are university trained, read Latin, and charge fees that would bankrupt your family for generations. They're in cities serving nobility. What you have is an old woman who knows herbs. She learned from her mother, who learned from her grandmother, an oral tradition going back forever. Some of what she knows actually helps. Most of it does nothing. None of it is enough to cure serious illness. She looks at you with eyes that have seen this play out 100 times. checks your forehead for heat, looks at your tongue, listens to your breathing. Then she makes her assessment. Your phlegm is out of balance. Too much cold, wet humor. You need warming, drying treatments. She gives you an herbal tea, elderflower maybe, yarrow, horehound, something bitter that makes your face scrunch. The hot liquid feels good going down your raw throat, even if it tastes like boiled plants and disappointment. She tells you to stay warm, rest if you can, and pray to Saint Sebastian or Saint Roch, whichever saint is locally popular for illness recovery. But here's what she's not telling you, because she doesn't know. That fever you're running, it's your body fighting an infection. Maybe influenza, maybe tuberculosis, maybe pneumonia. Could be any of dozens of diseases that regularly sweep through medieval Europe, killing in waves. Your immune system is trying to fight, but it's fighting with limited resources. You're malnourished. You've been working to exhaustion. Your body has no reserves. The fever climbs. By evening, you're not coherent. You're muttering things that don't make sense. Your family watches you thrash on that straw mattress, and they're helpless. There's no treatment beyond keeping you warm and trying to get liquids into you. Medieval medicine knows keeping the patient alive long enough for their body to fight off the infection. That's it. That's the whole strategy. If you're in a town, you might see a barber surgeon. These are a step below real physicians. They don't know Latin. They learned by apprenticeship. But they do know some practical medicine. Mostly they know how to bleed you, because bloodletting is the universal cure for everything. The logic within the humoral system makes perfect sense. Too much blood means imbalance. Remove blood, restore balance. So the surgeon takes a small sharp knife called a lancet and opens a vein, usually in your arm, sometimes your leg or neck, depending on what's being treated. The blood flows into a bowl, dark red, almost black in candlelight. You watch it drain out and you feel yourself getting weaker, dizzier. The surgeon measures the flow, deciding when enough is enough. Sometimes they're right, often they're not. You can be bled to death therapeutically. It happens. The patient is already weak from illness. The bleeding weakens them further. Their body can't recover. They die. And everyone concludes the disease was too strong, not that removing pints of blood from a sick person is maybe a bad idea. Leeches are the refined version. These aren't random leeches from a pond. These are medical leeches, raised specifically for this purpose. They're applied to your skin, where they latch on and start feeding. You can feel them pulsing as they suck. Each one takes maybe a tablespoon of blood before dropping off fat and satisfied. The bites itch afterward. Often they get infected. More problems piled on existing problems. Let's talk about other treatments. For headaches or mental illness, there's trepanation. They drill a hole in your skull while you're awake. Multiple people hold you down while someone applies a drill bit to your head and starts turning. The theory is that it releases pressure or lets evil spirits escape. The reality is that you're getting brain surgery without anesthesia, antiseptic, or any understanding of anatomy. Some people survive this. Archaeological evidence shows healed trepanation wounds, but many don't. Infection, hemorrhage, trauma. Death comes from all directions. Pain management is nearly non-existent. For minor pain, you grin and bear it. For serious pain, there's alcohol. Drink until you can't feel your body screaming. For surgery or extreme pain, there are mixtures containing opium, hemlock, mandrake root, and various other ingredients that induce unconsciousness. They call it dwale. The dosage is give them this much and hope. Too little and you're still awake feeling everything. Too much and you never wake up. It's not precise. It's barely controlled poisoning. Surgery is nightmare fuel. Imagine you've broken a bone. The break is bad bones sticking out through skin. A surgeon might try to set it. This involves pulling the bone back into rough alignment while you scream, then splinting it and hoping it heals straight. Often it doesn't. Medieval skeletons show bones healed at wrong angles, creating lifelong deformity. If the wound gets infected, which it usually does, they might amputate. Sawing through bone while you're held down, drunk if you're lucky, sober if you're not. The saw is not sterilized. The wound is not cleaned properly. The survival rate is abysmal. Here's a stat that'll haunt you. 30% of children die before age 5. That's not warfare, not accident, just regular illness and childhood diseases that we vaccinate against now. Measles, mumps, smallpox, whooping cough. These tear through medieval populations, killing the weak, and children are always the weak. If you make it past childhood, you might reach 50 or 60, but you'll arrive there broken, missing teeth from infection and grinding stone dust, vision failing from cataracts, hearing gone, joints destroyed by arthritis, back permanently bent from decades of labor. You'll be in constant pain. Medieval old age is just managed suffering until death provides relief. Let's talk about plague, because it needs mentioning. The Black Death hit Europe in 1347 and killed somewhere between 30 and 60% of the population. 30 to 60%. Half of everyone you know dying within a few years. Entire villages wiped out. Cities losing most of their population. Bodies piling faster than they could be buried. The disease presented with buboes, swollen lymph nodes in the groin or armpit that turned black. Hence the name. You'd develop fever chills, vomiting. The buboes would swell to the size of apples, incredibly painful. Most people died within a week of symptoms appearing. Some died in a day. The pneumonic form spread through coughing, which meant just being near infected, people could kill you. Medical response was useless. Doctors wore those famous bird beak masks, stuffed with herbs thinking smell caused disease. They prescribed avoiding bad air, balancing humors, prayer. Nothing worked. The disease burned through populations, and medieval medicine could only document the horror, not stop it. The psychological impact is hard to overstate. Imagine watching half your family die, your neighbors die, random people dropping in the streets. No explanation, no cure, no hope. Just death spreading like a fog. Some people became hysterically religious, flagellating themselves in hopes of appeasing God's wrath. Others became hedonistic, figuring they'd die anyway, so why not enjoy what time remained? Society fractured under the weight of mass death, and you're living in the aftermath. It's been decades, but the plague's ghost haunts everything. Labor shortages, because so many workers died. Empty houses, villages abandoned completely. Everyone's traumatized. Everyone knows someone who died horribly, and everyone knows it could come back. It did come back, actually. Smaller outbreaks every few years. You live with the constant threat. Your fever finally breaks after 3 days. You're weak as a newborn, can barely stand, but you're alive. Your body won the fight despite medieval medicine's best efforts to kill you. Now comes recovery, which will take weeks you don't have. So you give yourself days. Push yourself back to work when you're still weak, still coughing, still not right. That incomplete recovery becomes your new normal. A chronic cough that never quite leaves. Lungs that don't work like they used to. This is how medieval bodies work. Always slightly damaged. Always fighting something. Never given proper time to heal. You're operating at maybe 70% capacity, and that 70% has to carry you through years more of hard labor. The sun rises on another day. You survived the sickness. That's the victory. Not healing, not health, just survival. And that's going to have to be enough because the field is waiting. And work doesn't stop just because you nearly died. But there's something worse than sickness waiting in the wings. Something that makes individual suffering look trivial. Let me tell you about what happens when organized violence comes to visit. The rumor arrives before the soldiers do. That's how you know something terrible is coming. A traveler passing through mentions it casually. An army is moving. Could be English, could be French. Doesn't matter which, because to you, they're all the same. Armed men who take what they want and kill anyone who objects. You're in the middle of what historians call the 100 Years' War, though that name makes it sound more organized than it is. Really, it's a series of raids, battles, truces and betrayals lasting from 1337 to 1453. You don't know those dates. You just know that every few years soldiers come through and destroy everything. It's been happening your whole life. It'll keep happening until you die. The village calls an emergency meeting. The old men, the ones who survived the last raid, speak with bitter experience. Hide the grain. Drive the livestock into the forest. Send young women and children to relatives in more remote areas. These are standard procedures refined over generations of being caught between powers that don't care if you live or die. But here's the reality. There's nowhere truly safe. The army isn't marching in neat formation between clearly marked borders. It's spreading across the countryside like a plague, taking everything of value. This is intentional military strategy called a chevauchée. The goal is to destroy the enemy's economic capacity by ravaging civilian areas. Burn the farms, kill the animals, terrorize the population. Leave nothing that could support enemy forces. Your taxes paid to their army mean nothing in this moment. In war, Everyone is the enemy. Your life is worth less than a cow or a sack of grain. Livestock can be sold. Food can be eaten. But a dead peasant is just a problem to be buried. They come 3 days later at dusk. You hear them, first metal clanking hoofbeats on the road, rough voices. Maybe 40 or 50 men, some soldiers, others camp followers, merchants, orphans trailing the column like ghosts. Every villager bars their door a useless gesture and huddles inside in the dark, praying they ride past. They don't ride past. They stop. Your village is their camp tonight. Soldiers move house to house with practiced ease. They kick in doors. Boots heavy on your floor hands, tearing through your home. They're hungry, unpaid for months, so they take what's yours. They find your hidden grain, your dried meat, your winter stores, everything. If you protest, you're struck without a second thought. These men have seen death. Your suffering means nothing. Your wife shrinks into the corner, clutching the children. A soldier notices her laughs. With his comrade, a laugh you recognize from the stories. You step between them, instinct overriding sense, and he shoves you against the wall, a knife at your throat. His eyes are empty. You are not a person to him. You are an obstacle, and obstacles are removed. Your wife is crying, begging in words that tumble over themselves. The soldier looks at her, then at you. Then he shrugs and moves on. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he's got some limit he won't cross. Maybe he just doesn't find your wife attractive enough to bother. You'll never know. You're just grateful when they leave your women alone and move to the next house. Outside, they're setting up camp, using your fence wood for fires, slaughtering one of your chickens. You can smell it cooking. Your food, feeding them. They're laughing, singing songs, passing around skin of wine they looted from someone else, having a fine evening while your family sits in the dark, traumatized and robbed. This goes on for 2 days. They're not in a hurry. Why would they be? They've got food, shelter, and complete impunity. On the second day, they set fire to a house at the far end of the village. You never find out why. Maybe the owner resisted. Maybe they wanted to send a message. Maybe they were just bored. The house burns completely. Family inside gets out, barely losing everything to the flames. When they finally leave, they take your best cooking pot, your wife's dress, anything metal they can sell, and they leave behind destruction that looks casual because to them it was casual. You weren't enemies. You were resources to be exploited, like a mine they've stripped and abandoned. Now comes the really fun part. Justice. Because while war is terrible, the legal system designed to protect you is somehow worse. Let's say one of your neighbors, driven desperate by the theft of his winter stores, tries to steal grain from the Lord's stockpile. He's caught. Now he faces trial. By modern standards, what follows is insanity. By medieval standards, it's justice. There's no presumption of innocence. Accusation carries weight. If the Lord's steward says he saw your neighbor stealing, that's basically a conviction. Your neighbor can try to gather oath-takers, people who'll swear to his character. But if he's poor and friendless, good luck finding anyone willing to risk the Lord's displeasure. by vouching for him. The alternative is trial by ordeal. God will protect the innocent, the thinking goes. So the accused is forced to carry a red-hot iron bar 9 paces. Then his hand is bandaged. 3 days later, the bandage comes off. If the burn is healing cleanly, he's innocent. If it's festering with infection, he's guilty. The logic is divine intervention. The reality is that dirty bandages and lack of antiseptic meant almost everyone's hand got infected, or there's trial by water. The accused is bound and thrown into a pond or river. If he floats, he's guilty. If he sinks, he's innocent. Think about the hideous logic here. Floating means rejection by the pure element of water, thus guilty. Sinking means acceptance, thus innocent. But if you sink, you drown. So innocence equals death by drowning, while guilt means being pulled out and executed another way. The accused is literally in a no-win situation. Sink and drown, float and hang. Those are the options. And this is considered justice. This is how you determine guilt or innocence, by watching whether someone floats. If convicted punishment is swift and public, theft gets you hanged, not quickly either. Medieval hanging isn't the calculated drop that breaks the neck. It's suspension. You're hoisted up and left to strangle slowly, kicking and thrashing, taking minutes to die while a crowd watches. They bring children to these. It's educational, apparently, teaching the young that theft has consequences. More serious crimes get worse deaths. Treason means being hanged, drawn and quartered. First, you're hanged until nearly dead, then cut down. Your genitals are cut off. Your abdomen is opened and your intestines pulled out, often burned in front of you while you're still alive. Finally, you're beheaded and your body is cut into quarters. The pieces get displayed on city gates as warning. Your severed head might sit on a spike for months, slowly rotting birds pecking at it. And here's what's truly insane. People watch this as entertainment. They bring food, make a day of it. Not because medieval people are monstrous, but because death is so commonplace that it loses its power to horrify. When half your children die before age 5, when disease can wipe out your whole family in a week, watching a criminal die becomes just another occurrence. Tragic if you knew them, barely noteworthy if you didn't. The justice system protects property over people. A nobleman who kills a peasant might pay a fine. A peasant who steals from a nobleman hangs. The law sees very clearly who matters and who doesn't. Your life is worth less than a good horse. The legal system will spend more effort tracking down a stolen cow than investigating your murder. Winter arrives. You're facing months of cold with half your food gone. The children are hungry. They cry about it until you snap at them because their crying makes it worse. Your wife rations what's left with mathematical precision. A quarter loaf per person per day. Watery pottage with more water than vegetables. Ale stretched thin. By February, you're eating things you wouldn't have considered food. Bark stripped from trees and boiled. Acorns gathered from the forest floor. They're bitter and give you stomach cramps, but they have calories. Grass, even though it's mostly indigestible. You're just trying to fill your stomach, so the hunger pangs stop. The elderly start dying first. They give their portions to the younger generation and slowly fade. You find them one morning cold and still. A mercy, really. They went peacefully in their sleep, which is better than lingering through starvation. You bury them shallow because the ground is frozen. Come spring, you'll have to rebury them deeper before animals dig them up. The church provides some relief. Bread distributions for the desperate. Not enough, never enough, but something. The priest talks about suffering as purification, about earthly trials leading to heavenly reward. You want to believe him. Want this pain to have meaning beyond simple cruelty. But mostly, you just take the bread and try not to think about how many more weeks until spring. Spring does come. It always does. The earth doesn't care about human suffering. It continues its cycle. You plant again in fields trampled by soldiers. Using seed grain you shouldn't plant but have to, because not planting means certain starvation next winter. You hope, despite everything you hope, for good weather, for peace, for 1 year without catastrophe. The wheel turns, war recedes, for now. But you know it'll return. War always returns. That's the lesson you've learned. Power doesn't care about your survival. It uses you, discards you, and expects you to keep producing grain and children and taxes until you're used up. But night falls, and with night comes the final mercy, the one thing that makes this all bearable. Let me tell you about the only peace you'll get. The day is finally dying. Thank God. You can feel it in your bones, that particular exhaustion that comes from pushing your body past every reasonable limit. The sun is setting, and with it comes permission to stop. Not because you've finished. You're never finished. But because darkness makes work dangerous and wasteful, so you get to rest. That's the victory. Not accomplishment, just surviving to rest. The walk back is slow. Every step deliberate. Your body is a collection of complaints. Back screaming, knees grinding, hands blistered and bleeding where yesterday's blisters burst, and today's work reopened them. You are not alone in this misery. Everyone shuffles along equally wrecked. There's cold comfort in shared suffering. At least you're all miserable together. The village smells like smoke and cooking and animals and unwashed humans. It's not pleasant, but it's home. These smells mean safety, mean rest is coming. Your body responds to that promise. Something unclenches slightly. You're not healed, not even close, but you're done. For today, you're done. Inside, the fire is already going. Your wife has kept it alive while managing her own impossible workload. Children, spinning, cooking, water carrying, animals, mending, 1,000 tasks that fill the hours between dawn and dusk. She looks as tired as you feel. You exchange a glance that communicates everything. We made it through another one. That's all? That's enough? Dinner is pottage, always pottage. Boiled vegetables turned to mush thickened with stale bread. It's warm, and warmth is its own blessing when the alternative is cold. You eat mechanically, food as fuel. The taste barely registers anymore. It's just something you swallow to keep your body functioning. After eating, there are small tasks. Banking the fire so it'll last through the night. Checking the door is secure. Making sure the animals have water. These routines are comforting in their way. Small acts of control in a life that's mostly controlled by forces beyond you. You do what you can. That's all anyone can do. The children are already asleep. They dropped off right after eating, exhausted by their own scaled-down labor. They'll sleep deep, the sleep of youth that doesn't wake for anything short of crisis. You envy them that. Your sleep will be different, lighter, broken by cold or discomfort or the need to piss. Getting old means sleeping poorly, and you're old now. Past 30. Your body showing the wear of decades of hard use. The church bell rings. Compline. Final office. Permission to rest. You lie down on the straw mattress. It's compressed to almost nothing from months of use. There's a depression that fits your body. It's not comfortable. Nothing about this is comfortable, but it's familiar. The scratchy wool blanket, your wife's warmth beside you, the sound of others breathing in the darkness. Let me tell you what falling asleep feels like when you're this tired. It's not gentle, it's not peaceful. It's your body shutting down systems forcibly because it has no choice. Muscles unclenching finally. Joints settling into positions that hurt slightly less. Your mind trying to process the day, but too exhausted to do more than flicker through images. The field, the plow, the bread, the soldiers, the endless work. Then even those fade. You drift, not sleeping yet, just hovering at the edge. This is the only time your mind gets to wander. In darkness, in exhaustion, when there's nothing left to do but breathe and wait for sleep. You think about things you don't have time for during the day, about whether next year will be better, about your children and whether they'll survive to adulthood, about death, which is never far away, about God and heaven, and whether any of this suffering means something beyond simple endurance. The house is dark, truly dark. The fire is just coals now, providing almost no light. Outside there's nothing, no street lights, no electric glow, just absolute blackness. It would terrify someone from the modern world, but to you, it's comforting. Darkness means rest, means no one expects you to work. The world has simplified to just this moment, just breathing, just the gradual release of muscles that have been tensed since before dawn. Your body twitches as you drift towards sleep. Little muscle spasms that jerk you partially awake. This is normal. Your nervous system winding down, each twitch pulling you back briefly before you sink deeper. Eventually, you cross over properly into real sleep, the kind that would be deep and restorative if it lasted long enough. But it won't. You'll wake in the night. Everyone does. The cold will penetrate even the wool blanket. You'll need to piss. The chamber pot scrapes as you drag it closer. The sound wakes others, but no one complains. This is normal. Nighttime is punctuated by these small disturbances. You relieve yourself. The sharp smell of urine in the close air. Then back under the blanket, back towards sleep. The second sleep comes easier. You found a comfortable position finally, one that doesn't put pressure on the worst of the aches. Your wife shifts, her back against yours, sharing warmth. This isn't romance, this is survival. Two bodies conserving heat in a cold house on a cold night. But there's comfort in it, in not being alone, in the simple animal warmth of another human. Sleep in medieval times isn't one solid block like we try for now. It's segmented. You sleep, wake, sleep again. The night is long and there's nothing to do in darkness but rest. No books to read, no screens to check. Just darkness and rest, and the occasional need to adjust position or relieve yourself. This pattern is natural to you. You've never known anything else. Dreams come, strange ones, your mind processing the day's events and fears. You dream about the field, which makes sense because you spend most of your waking hours there. But in dreams, the field is different, sometimes endless, sometimes hostile, sometimes filled with things that don't make sense. The dreams aren't usually pleasant. Stress and fear and exhaustion don't produce peaceful sleep. But you're not conscious enough to care. Dreams just happen. You endure them like you endure everything else. Toward dawn, your sleep gets lighter. Your body knows morning is coming, even before the bell rings. There's a gradual return of awareness. The cold, the discomfort, the knowledge that soon you'll have to rise and do this all again. But not yet. Not quite yet. You have maybe another hour. You hold onto it desperately. This rest is precious. It's all you have. The house is still. Everyone caught in that pre-dawn moment. The animals are quiet. Even the chickens haven't started yet. This is the most peaceful the world gets. Dark, silent, still. If you had the energy to appreciate it, you might find something beautiful in this moment. The simplicity of it. Just existence. Just breathing. No demands yet. No work. Just the space between sleep and waking. But you don't have energy to appreciate anything. You're just tired. Bone deep tired that rest never quite fixes. You'll wake tired, work tired, eat tired, sleep tired. That's the cycle. That's all there is. The exhaustion is the baseline. Feeling good is not a state you experience. You just oscillate between levels of tired. Your last thoughts before the bell rings are probably mundane. Wondering if it'll rain. Whether that cough your youngest has gotten worse. If the stored grain will last. Small worries. Immediate concerns. You don't have the luxury of thinking long term. Tomorrow is as far as you can manage. Next week might as well be next year. You just try to make it through one day at a time. The bell starts. Matins. 2 in the morning or thereabouts. For monks, that means prayer. For you, it means morning is coming. Another day is starting. The wheel is turning again. You have maybe an hour before you need to rise. You try to sink back into sleep. Squeeze out every last minute of rest. But your body knows it's starting to wake, preparing itself for another day of the same. This is the mercy of medieval life, not the work, not the food, not the law or medicine or any of it. The mercy is this. Every night you get to stop. You get to lie down in darkness and let exhaustion claim you. You get to not be conscious of the suffering for a few hours. Sleep is the small death. The practice run for the big one that's coming eventually. And it's the only peace you'll ever know. The darkness holds you safely until dawn, until the bells, until it all begins again. You're waking up again. The bells are ringing. It's morning in the 14th century, and another day of brutal, grinding survival is beginning. Except it's not. Because you're not actually there. You're here, in your time, in your world. And the distance between where we've been and where you are is almost unimaginable. Let me bring you back now. You're wherever you are as you listen to this. Lying in a bed with a mattress, real mattress, springs or foam supporting your body, clean sheets that were washed in hot water with actual detergent, a pillow, multiple pillows maybe. The room is temperature controlled. You're not shivering, not sweating, just comfortable in a way that would seem like impossible luxury to our medieval friends. The air you're breathing doesn't smell like smoke and shit and unwashed humans. It's just air, maybe with a hint of whatever air freshener or laundry detergent you use. Clean air, safe air. Air that's not trying to kill you with disease or fill your lungs with particulate matter from a badly vented fire. Water comes from a tap. Clean, safe, cold if you want, hot if you want. You can drink it without worrying about dysentery. You can wash in it. It's just there, available, abundant. Nobody in the 14th century had this. Not kings, not popes, nobody. The poorest person in a developed nation today has access to clean water that medieval nobility couldn't dream of. Your food is refrigerated. It doesn't have stones ground into it. It's not crawling with ergot fungus or going rotten while you eat it. You have choices, variety. If you don't like what's for dinner, you can make something else. That's not a thing medieval people experienced, ever. Food was what you had. You ate it, period. The idea of food preferences was almost incomprehensible. You have medicine, real medicine. Medicine based on germ theory and chemistry and understanding of how bodies actually work. You cut yourself badly. Clean it. Bandage it. Maybe get antibiotics if it looks infected. Medieval version. Hope it doesn't fester. Pray to saints. Maybe die from a cut that would be trivial today. That's not hyperbole. People died from infected scratches all the time. Here's what I want you to understand. The people we visited weren't superhuman. They weren't made of different stuff. They felt pain like you do, got tired like you do, wanted comfort and safety and full bellies like you do. What they didn't have was any of the infrastructure we've built. No medical knowledge, no sanitation, no food preservation, no legal protections worth mentioning, no education, no social mobility, nothing. They just endured, day after day, year after year, watching their children die, watching their bodies break down decades early, working until they couldn't work anymore, and then dying, usually badly. Medieval death was often drawn out and agonizing. Quick death was considered lucky. And you know what? They did it. They survived. Most of them anyway. They found ways to make life bearable. Community, religion, small pleasures like a warm fire or a decent harvest. They laughed. They loved. They made the best of circumstances that would crush most modern people within days. That's not a suggestion we should go back to medieval conditions. God, no. Medieval life was a nightmare. Brutal, short, filled with suffering we've worked very hard to eliminate. We shouldn't romanticize it. We shouldn't pretend there was some virtue in the hardship. It was just hardship, just pain, just people doing what they had to do to survive. But we should remember it. Remember what came before. Remember that every comfort you experience, every bit of safety and health and security was paid for by generations of people who suffered without those things. They broke their bodies so we could build better tools. They died young so we could develop medicine. They endured so we could improve. The distance between their time and ours is vast, 700 years. But the distance between their hearts and ours is almost nothing. Same hopes, same fears, same capacity for joy and suffering. We're them, just luckier, just benefiting from centuries of accumulated progress. Small improvements, building on small improvements, until clean water and antibiotics and human rights became things we expect rather than miracles. So tonight, when you drift off in your comfortable bed, under your clean blankets in your temperature-controlled room, maybe spare a thought for them. For the millions who lived and died in conditions you'd find unendurable, who kept going when keeping going seemed impossible, who somehow found the strength to work another day, plant another crop, raise another child, despite everything. Their lives were hard, unimaginably hard, but they weren't empty. They weren't meaningless. They were doing what humans do, surviving, adapting, caring for each other in whatever ways they could, building something, even if they didn't know what they were building, creating the future that became our present. That's their legacy. Not castles, not battles, not the kings and nobles who get all the attention in history books. The real legacy is the ordinary people who endured, who lived, who kept humanity going through the worst times so better times could eventually arrive. We owe them. We owe them everything, really. Because without their suffering and persistence, we wouldn't be here. So, rest easy. You've earned it. Not through their labor, but through the accident of being born into a world they helped create without knowing they were creating it. Let their story settle. Let it inform how you see your own struggles, not to minimize them. Modern life has its own hardships, but to contextualize them, to understand that difficulty is relative, but resilience is universal. The wheel keeps turning. The seasons continue, but we're not bound to them like they were. We've broken free of some of those ancient cycles, and that's worth protecting, worth appreciating, worth fighting to maintain and improve. Because progress isn't guaranteed. Each generation chooses whether to build on what came before or let it crumble. Thank you for walking through this day with me, for letting me show you the reality behind the romance, the actual experience of medieval life stripped of fantasy and presented as it was: brutal, exhausting, often short, but ultimately human. Just people trying to survive in a world that gave them almost nothing to work with. Sleep well. Tomorrow, you'll wake to a world that's kinder, safer, more forgiving of human weakness than anything medieval people knew. And that's not something to feel guilty about. It's something to be grateful for, to protect, to appreciate. Until next time, I'm Peter Miller, reminding you that history isn't just dates and events. It's people, real people, living, struggling, enduring, and somehow impossibly keeping humanity going through the darkest times. Just like us, just trying to make it through one more day. Good night.